Now, analysts have commended the move by the Nigeria's AMCON to redeem and refinance its maturing obligations at the end of the year, saying it would allay fears of inflation and financial instability. Well, that's the view of many. And CNBC Africa's Godfrey Mutizwa caught up with Nigeria's Central Bank Governor Sanusi Lamido Sanusi on the sidelines of the annual meeting of the African Development Bank in Morocco. Take a look.
If you remember, the way AMCON bonds were issued, they're issued at different points in time. Okay, initially, some were issued to banks as they ended up agreeing on M&As. Then you had some that were issued to banks at the point they were taken over by AMCON because they had failed to reach M&A. Yes. Now, some of those banks got the bonds at a very low rate of interest, like 7%. In between the period, interest rates went up. Right. Which means that the banks that had just been recapitalized were facing huge mark-to-market risks. And they'd have had to wipe out their capital again because of rates moving from, 7% to 12%, okay, right. and higher.
So you had to rescue
So to make sure that we didn't put them in trouble, we basically took over those banks, took over those bonds and swapped them with automobiles. So it was in that process that we ended up holding 3.6 trillion. Yeah, okay, yeah. And so we are currently holding 3.6 trillion in our books, and we're simply saying, well, since we're not lending any more to AMCON, why don't we just agree on a flexible and workable structure, okay, for AMCON to repay us over time, and then let AMCON deal with the private sector holders.
Yeah. Does that mean that the central bank ended up picking up the tab, if you like, of keeping these banks solvent and afloat?
Well, at the end of the day, the Central Bank of Nigeria was responsible for financial stability. We set up AMCON, and we haven't paid anything. We're holding instruments that basically say AMCON is indebted to us. Right. But the tab is being picked up by the banks. 60–70% of the value of these bonds is going to come from a sinking fund into which every bank is contributing for the next 10 years. So the commercial banks are the ones picking up the tab. The central bank is not picking up the tab. We are a creditor who will be paid. And those paying us are AMCON and the commercial banks.
So from where you sit, you're saying there's absolutely no impact and you're not concerned at all
absolutely
about
not.
the maturity?
There is absolutely no impact on the balance sheet of the central bank. There's no impact on the balance sheet of the commercial banks. Commercial banks are simply swapping one class of assets eligible for liquidity with another class of assets. Their balance sheet is neither expanding nor contracting. The only balance sheet that is affected is the AMCON balance sheet, which is shrinking by 1 trillion. So you've got to just ask yourself, what is the impact of a shrinkage in AMCON's liabilities on the economy? On the wider economy, it's so positive because, first of all, what you've done is for the banks, you've given them instrument that makes them creditors to the federal government directly, T-bills, as opposed to contingent. For the federal government, a contingent exposure on the bonds has shrunk from 5.7 to 4.7, later to 3.6 next year, where the only creditor will be central bank.
Yeah. What about the impact of this on rates and also the interest rate that you are going to be paying yourselves?
I don't think there's any impact on market rates, like I said, because AMCON is at the moment not a player on the interbank market. Okay, so you're not going to have any impact on interest rates. Now, what we have done in the central bank is we are going to charge them a sub-market rate. We're charging them 6% because we worked out the model, and frankly, the costs of the resolution were much higher than we had anticipated. We worked out the model, and it looks to us that the way AMCON can comfortably pay us back in 10 years or under is for rates to be very low. Now, we can't expect private sector players to lend to AMCON at 6%. And there's no point charging a market interest rate to an institution that's really a resolution vehicle and a bad bank. So it gives us the flexibility as central bank. We don't have those costs of funds to charge a low rate of interest, to give them a long tenor, because we already have 3.6 anyway that we're holding. Right. So it's just giving them, it's like a bilateral restructuring arrangement. Pay us back this 3.6 trillion over 10 years at 6% rate of interest. And we collect the money from the banks and from AMCON.
Right. So, Governor, with perhaps AMCON getting out of the way, what remains on your agenda now? Of course, we know there are many challenges that Nigeria continues to face.
Well, for me, I finished my work, frankly. My job was to restore financial stability.
You're satisfied that's been done?
Yes, the banks have been fixed. Inflation has been single digit for 4 consecutive months. It will be single digits for the rest of this year, we think. It might go up to about 10% later in the year, but I don't think, frankly, unless there's a major shock, I don't see inflation going beyond 10% for the rest of the year. Reserves are stable. we're getting accretion. Exchange rate has been stable and remains stable. We have the balance sheet to support the naira if there are temporary shocks. Major concern on the reserves and exchange rate side is an output shock because of the oil theft.
Yeah.
If it continues to impact oil revenue negatively, it will impact reserve accretion and put pressure on the naira.
Right.
But something is being done about it by the government. Yeah. So frankly, I've done my job. It's complete.
Yeah.
There are a number of things that are work in progress. The financial inclusion program, the mortgage refinance company, the cashless Lagos, and the whole transformation of the payment system, and some internal work we're doing in the central bank on capacity building and the industry for competency framework. But that is ongoing. That will outlive me, but so I'm not really going to embark on any new thing at the moment.
It sounds to me, Governor, like you're saying you will not be renewing your term. You are done here.
Well, I've announced that publicly. I'm not going to renew my term. June it will be 4 years. So basically, in 4 years, I've done what I planned to do within the 5, and at the moment, what is important is to first of all maintain course and basically just hang on to what we've achieved and not take stability for granted, and then hope that we can have a very smooth transition to the next governor, who will then assure the markets of continuity. Yeah. But for me.